my name's Alan, as mentioned. The format for today doesn't allow for questions as such, so if you have any questions arising from what I had to say, once I've got a copy in my hand at the end of this, feel free to come and talk to me. The talk, as you may have seen, promoted as You, Them and Us. The subtitle I've given it is Egocentrism, Stereotypes and Understanding. Now, most people probably see the words egocentrism and stereotypes and think of them as being fairly negative ideas. But egocentrism is inevitable, stereotypes are necessary and actually quite useful, and if you understand how they work, they do actually help lead to understanding. So what I'm going to do is use a bit of psychology, a few examples from the everyday and a bit of sci-fi, and explain all of that. First question is, what are you for the duration of this one life that you know you have? Clearly you're a human being, you're also you. What you is may change slightly over the course of your life, but there are certain traits which will remain constant and some things that change over time. So ultimately, whilst there are incremental changes over time, you are recognisably you from start to finish. Which is to say that you are not the Borg, you are individuals. The thing about being an individual is that the majority of our actions that make us individual are not consciously deliberate. We have an autonomic nervous system, which is involuntary. We have a somatic nervous system, which is voluntary. And what that means is that we've got things that happen in our body that we can't control and wouldn't want to. And there are things that are necessary that we can control, like breath, obviously, which we can hold, but you can't hold it until you pass out, for example. And a lot of modern philosophers also talk about this thing called free won't, which is the idea that your body can start to do something and you can then consciously decide to stop doing it. And then obviously, as I say, voluntary stuff like the clapping and singing that we all just engaged in. The point being is that we are as much spectators to many of our actions as anyone who is standing outside of our body watching us do these things. And we have to spend some time explaining what we do to ourselves. But fortunately for us, it's relatively easy to explain a lot of our actions because they make sense in the context of how we feel. If you feel hungry, you reach for some food. If you feel thirsty, you reach for some liquid. When we look at other people, of course, we don't have that internal dialogue going on. But for ourselves, to explain how we behave, we can be reasonably contiguous and make a certain amount of sense to ourselves. So the upshot of it is that we spend an awful lot of time thinking about how we act, thinking about what we feel, and then thinking about those thoughts. Thinking about thinking, and this recursive process of thinking about things and then thinking about that and then thinking about that is an extremely human thing to do. It's basically what defines us and separates us from chimpanzees, for example. This process of thinking about thinking, in philosophical circles is more often called metacognition. In psychological circles is often called mentalizing, but they are used interchangeably as terms. And as I said, it's effectively the basis of the human way of thinking. So you use your mind to generate theories about your own mind, and you also use that to generate theories about other people's minds. The term theory of mind, I had to use the short one so I didn't go on to a second line. You'll often hear it referred to as TOM if you listen to people doing talks like this one. The theory of mind is an idea that came into the scientific field in about 1978, where they plaintively asked, do chimpanzees have a theory of mind? At the time they said no, now they're saying maybe. A little bit after that, Daniel Dennett, some of you may have read, referred to it as the intentional stance, the ability to understand that someone else has intent and that informs their actions. And a lot of current theorists refer to the process as mind reading, and I don't mean the Uri Geller sort of thing. I mean the reading your own mind and then using that as a basis for reading other people's minds. So in other words, just to make this a little bit clearer, we introspect on our own beliefs, desires, intentions and emotions. We use that knowledge that we generate from that to intuit about other people's beliefs, desires and so forth. And to an extent, we can therefore use that to think about the behaviour of people in larger groups. So, this seems like an odd question, but if you're using your mind to think about other things, what constitutes a them as opposed to a that?
Alan, I'm really sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
If there are any shots, you can stand on the other side of the screen.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because I'm less tight.
I'll need to get you to take over the clip.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's cool. So, I'll just take that on. So this is the first bit of sci-fi. Second bit of sci-fi, actually. Back one. Okay, so if you're watching Star Wars and you're engrossed in the story of Star Wars, you might explain the humanness of these on the basis of the fact that they are complex machines. They're actually programmed to seem human-like. If you're slightly more detached from the process, you might say, oh, they're just actors, and they're supposed to make it seem human-like. That's fine, those are perfectly good reasons why they aren't human at all. But what about something that's complex, that's programmed to do things like your computer? Well, your computer does what it's supposed to do on a daily basis, and you think of it as your computer when it's doing it. But then it glitches, or it blue screens, or it crashes, or whatever, and suddenly it becomes a stupid computer. Stupid? Really? In other words, you actually try and project your brain into your computer to try and understand why it's gone wrong. What the heck is going on that's caused it to become a stupid computer? So, as I say, we push our minds out of ourselves to try and interpret behaviour that we can't understand, to try and better understand it. But what about your car? I mean, if you've got an older car and these colder days, you might find it's a bit difficult to start in the morning. Your car suddenly becomes temperamental. And in fact, does anyone here watch Top Gear at all? Yeah. Okay. Bit of homework for you. Watch Top Gear, listen to their vehicle reviews, and notice Jeremy Clarkson in particular, whenever he refers to a car as being bonkers or insane, at the end of the review he'll say that he loves it. But if he says it's very clinical and very precise, he won't like it at all. So his love of cars is very much predicated on love of human-like things, and human-like means unpredictable. So, more importantly for us, I suppose, is how do we think about other people? The most important other person, most likely, is a romantic partner, significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend. How well do you know them? And possibly more importantly, how well do they think you know them? There was a study that was done with a whole bunch of couples. They've been together between 6 months and 6 years, and they were asked to guess what their partner thought about themselves with regards to their self-ratings on independence, intelligence, those sort of things. And they had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5. On a scale of 1 to 5, obviously a random guess is 20%. Can I hazard a guess as to how accurate people actually were? Just say a number out loud that's somewhere between 1 and 100.
18%.
Sorry?
18%.
18? So less than accurate? More. Cynical.
More. Throw a marker out there.
70%, 50%, if you could click again. The actual guess rate accuracy was 44%. Now the thing is, how accurate people thought they were was 2%. So people think that they are twice as accurate as they actually are in interpreting someone they should know fairly well. And I should mention that 6 months to 6 years sounds like quite a broad age range. There was no difference based on how long the couple had been together. So, yeah, unfortunately, those wonderful marriages that you see that lasted for years and years and years, it's nothing to do with how well they understand each other. It's how well they forgive each other. And that's just it. I'm going to go beyond the science here and just suggest that the longer you've been with someone, the more you trust them, the more you recognise that they're at least trying, and the more slack you give them unless you're tired or grumpy or stressed. And that's when the arguments happen, when you stop giving each other the slack that you need to give to recognise that they are another person. They're never going to be able to 100% guess what's going on in your head. And I'll get to how to solve that problem in a little bit. Right. In fact, if one tries a little harder, have you all heard of How to Make Friends and Influence People, the book? It was written by Dale Carnegie. One of the principles that he puts forth is taking another person's perspective. This seems like a really good idea and as a way to come to understand what someone else is going through. Take their perspective. Brilliant idea. Unfortunately, okay, good. Same experiment as I just mentioned, approximately. There were two types of perspective taking. There was taking perspective, so making a guess based on what you knew of someone, and getting perspective, and that is talk to them about the topics about which the question's related. Don't make any notes or anything, because that would be cheating. And then try and guess on that scale of 1 to 5, having spoken to your partner, how they feel. Now, taking perspective, which is using what you know of them and trying to guess their answer, again, about 40%. Getting their perspective still only came in at about 50%, which is a bit of a gain, but it's not a lot. But expected accuracy was a gain of about 80%, but when you actually spoken to them, you now thought that you were hitting it 90%. So you recognise that it's a way of getting better at understanding the other person, but you're still woefully misinformed as to how well you know that other person. So, now we'll get on to those other important people in your life: co-workers, colleagues, and close personal acquaintances. Again. Back in 1966, although this is from a book in '77, as you can see, Thomas Allen came up with the idea of the Allen curve. What this basically says is that the closer, that's 8 metres there, 16, 24, 32, the closer you are to someone in your office, the more you communicate with them. The further away you are, the less you communicate with them. And that's even in this day of email. Come on, everyone's email the person that's 2 metres away from them. You do that. But beyond this, and more recent work has pointed out that there is a sort of another level to it, and that is social connection. It can be that you are working on the same project team. So you're not sitting next to each other, but you're on the same project team, which has a very similar effect. So there are these two ideas. There's the physical closeness of someone causing you to communicate with them more, understand them better, and there's psychological closeness. So you've got physical and psychological distance, both of which interacting with each other to define how well you get to know people, how well you even try to know people. And the further away someone is, whether physically or psychologically, the more inclined we are to use stereotypes, to try and sort of fill in the blanks between what we know and what we want to know. And then beyond that, we'll just insert, well, if I was in that situation, I would do that. So using our minds to make up the information that we're missing. So we use these stereotypes, but stereotypes are inherently dehumanizing, because what we're doing is we're taking a whole complex person and rendering them down to 3 or 4 or 5 key elements of who they are. Sometimes just a single thing. Oh, you're this, that, oh, you're a unionist, you're a whatever. And so we remove absolutely everything about their complexity and render it down to a couple of things. A really good example of that is what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. Obviously, we've seen these rather difficult to watch videos where there's a chap calling another chap an infidel, and we know what happens after he's used that word. But unfortunately, the other side is doing worse, because they're flying drones, which means they're thousands of miles away. So you've got the physical distance. They're referring to them as insurgents, so you've got psychological distance, and using that as an excuse to forget that the people that you're dropping bombs on are human. So this was the response that one Pakistani, a bunch of Pakistani artists had. They printed out a very large vinyl printout of one of the actual victims of a drone strike and put it out on the field, as you can see, so that the drone pilots, through their cameras, could actually see who it was that bombing. And so reconnect them to the fact that you are having an effect on people, and that includes children. To reconnect with their humanity, basically. And remember when I said that we're all one individual? We can empathise with a single other individual, and that's what they've done here. They've shortened the physical distance, they've shortened the psychological distance, they've made it possible for people to recognise and have emotions about the situation and so forth. This is what's known as the identifiable victim effect. It sounds quite negative, but basically what it's saying is what I said before, is we are one person. We can only have empathy with another person. We've never been a group of people. And the other people that use that, if you would, are charities. This is one that I used to see in New Zealand. I don't know if it played here in the UK. And it was for a charity called Christian Children's Fund. And they would tell you about what was going on in the town or a village or a whole group of people, but they would cascade it all down into a stereotype and an exemplar of one little girl. And you can empathise with that, and that's how you get money. As soon as a charity advertises and talks about massive numbers, the number of people who actually give money through the floor, because we are single individuals. We can only cope with the pain of another individual. We can't even contemplate pain as it multiplies into hundreds and thousands and so on and so forth. So, just to summarise and to sort of tie it all together, we each are just one person, and trite as it is, we are unique, just like everybody else. Our ability to think about others is directly tied to our ability to think about ourselves. So sometimes we use how we think to fill in the blank spaces and what others seem to think, and we should therefore communicate with other people to find out what they think and what they feel. Basically, fill in the blanks with real information, not guesses based on stereotypes, not guesses based on how you would deal with the situation. And cut each other more slack, especially if you don't feel like it, if you're hungry, grumpy, whatever, because that's when things really do fall down. Understanding ourselves is hard enough, and other people harder still. So be sure and talk to each other and cut yourself a touch more slack. Oh, you missed the last slide. Never mind. There was another slide at the end. It was the second email, I think. I've got nothing to plug, so I'll put the details of a book that covers a lot of this if you're interested in this sort of thing. Thinking about yourself, thinking about other people and how those things interact and what pitfalls are and so on and so forth, by an excellent psychologist based in the States called Nicholas Epley. And I'll pop that up on the Facebook if anyone's interested later on today or tomorrow. Yeah,
I'll send it out on the Facebook page. So.
All right, and like I said, if you have any questions or comments or feedback, because this is the first time I've done this talk, once we're downstairs with a coffee in my hand, I'll be happy to talk to you.